Yes. Hello, 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 whoever's out there. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I decided to do kind of an impromptu live stream. I've been thinking about the audit, GTI audit for a couple days, and I wanted to throw out some thoughts. That's all, just opinions and thoughts, not legal advice, of course, but just opinions and thoughts, things that maybe you've thought about also, and it'd be interesting. I believe that the receiver or receivers council reviews all these videos because they've indicated they have. So I'm kind of going to put some questions out there. We have a hearing on May 6th about the audit, so perhaps they could respond to these questions. I will also put the stuff in writing. I'm going to submit a brief with the court again, um, and we will go from there. Before I start, and again, I'm just going to talk about the GTI audit and just kind of throw out some questions, and you can do with it as you please. I hope everybody is having a great Saturday night. Lovely Saturday night here out in SoCal, beautiful weather, etc. So I think you're going to find some of this interesting, I hope. And if not, then that's the way it goes. Before I start, um, if April showers bring May flowers, what do May flowers bring? Pilgrims, of course. What building in your town has the most stories by far? The public library. What's the least spoken language in the world? Sign language. Why did the god of thunder need to stretch his legs? He was a little bit Thor. Have you heard of the new sport called quiet tennis? It's like normal tennis, but without the racket. And my 6-year-old daughter, who I don't have a 6-year-old daughter, but just for the sake of this discussion, as we like to say, my 6-year-old daughter has lined up all of her dolls towards the outdoor grill. Looks like she's preparing some type of barbecue. And last but not least, and it's probably last is more important. What do you call a Frenchman who's been attacked by a cat? Claude. All right. So bring you up to speed on last week. I don't remember which day, but at a court hearing, the receiver indicated that kind of out of the blue, the auditor had sent a letter the day of the court hearing resigning as the auditor. And seemed like out of the blue, didn't seem like anybody knew anything. So I kind of wanted to explore that a little bit. So I kind of did. And I was wondering how we got to that point. And if you recall, the auditing trail of this company is a shit show, just to be nice about it. For example, the first auditor got kicked out by the SEC. The second auditor got fired. The third auditor, I think she had to go on leave, so she couldn't complete the job. The fourth auditors apparently had a restart. I don't know why, but they had a restart, and they apparently also did not complete the job. They asked, apparently, based upon what the Receivers Council indicated at the hearing, they asked for more money and then they quit. So that's the history of the beautiful audit. And the receiver, if you recall, maybe you don't recall, September 2024, the kind of indication was that they were close to getting all the audit and compliance stuff done, suggested that, or would be done in short order. I think the order said in short order or something equivalent to that. So we're talking about September, and now we're April. That would be about 19 months, something like that. So I was concerned by that turn of events about the auditor. So I started kind of looking into it a little bit. Some of the stuff I can't, and by the way, so I've had interaction with the attorney for the receiver, and he's been, honestly, he's been very communicative and fine. And I don't think counsel was involved in any respect with regard to the auditor. I have no reason to suspect that. But my understanding is that some of the documents that exist can't be spoken about until they're publicly released. So I'm not going to be able to discuss certain documents until they're publicly released. And my understanding is that the Receivers Council will be releasing them prior to the May 6th hearing. So I think they'll be in play. But I can kind of describe the situation without having to go into those particular documents. So kind of what I did is I started to kind of look, because I was relying upon the auditor I was relying upon the receiver, that because if any of you recall, the receiver, I don't know if it was in a report or it was in court or both, the receiver or the Receivers Council represented that they had either done business, and I don't remember which one, either the Receivers Council or the receiver had done business with this particular CPA firm. And the name of the CPA firm that we're talking about, at least for tonight's purposes, is Barton. And they're based in Barton CPA PLLC, based in Cypress, Texas, apparently. And apparently they were hired to do this gig. Now, why they were hired in Texas, I don't know. I don't know whose connection that was. I don't know if they're connected to, because they hired corporate counsel in Texas also. I don't know if they're connected to the corporate counsel. I don't know what the corporate counsel is doing, to be honest. And that's separate and apart from the Receiver Council. But I don't know what they're doing, because they really haven't said what they're doing. I don't know what they were paid. But anyway, so Barton was chosen as the third and fourth auditor. So when I said third and fourth, that's Barton both times. And so what I did is I started to look into Barton a little bit. And by the way, this is maybe perfectly meaningless, but with the history of the auditing trail of this company, I would think that both the auditor and the receiver would be conscious of not engaging any typing auditing firm that had any questions. Why would I be concerned about that? Because the prior two auditing firms were a disaster. One shut down by the SEC, and one that you had to fire because they were not doing what you wanted them to do. Boy, I noticed I can't spell mysterious, by the way, either. Interesting. Which is very mysterious to me that I can't spell mysterious. So again, with that as the backdrop, you would think you want to be super careful. So because everybody's watching the audit because of the prior audit history. So either the receiver or the Receivers Council, I don't remember which one, had prior relationship with this firm, chose this firm. And if you recall, the first time, or the first person, or at least this is how it was represented in my recollection, the lead person who was handling, so this would be number three auditor. By the way, it's number three auditor in like the last 2-3 years. But number three auditor, they started the project, they couldn't complete it. They had to go on maternity leave. I don't know if that was disclosed before they were hired, that they would not be able to complete the engagement. I don't know if they misallocated time and didn't know how long it was going to take them, but for whatever reason they couldn't complete the task, so they had to bow out. The same firm remained. The new guys or new girls, I don't know who it is, but I don't know any of these people, by the way. The new people started, but for some reason, and it's never been explained in any coherent manner. For some reason, they claimed they had to start over, and in order to finish. And then you heard different things said in court. It was disclosed that it was really close to being done. There were some transactions that they needed some additional stuff. And there's been like references throughout about it being almost done. But in court, I think about 2 hearings ago, it sounded like it was done, and I was expecting it the next time, which would have been the last hearing when they said that the auditor had quit. So with that as a backdrop, I started to look into the history of Barton, and I'm not looking about past history because past history is not really relevant. Really, is what relevant is what's happening in the current time, because that's when they were involved. So I went back. First thing I saw is in November of 2024, so recent time, that the PCAOB, which is the organization that basically regulates auditors, after having chased these guys for a while, found against them. I don't know what the terminology would be, but entered it into a censure. They were censured by this body, fined $25,000 for not filing timely reports. This was the end of 24. I believe the firm was hired the beginning of 25, or there may be some engagement the beginning of 2025. So with that as the background, remember, we had the prior 2 auditors had serious problems. So these would have been number 3. And prior to the time they were engaged, they were found to have not been reporting properly and fined, one of 5 firms that were fined $25,000 for not having reported timely, not doing what they needed to do, not doing compliance work that was needed. And for an auditor, you would think that compliance would be important. So that maybe that should have caught the attention of someone who was going to hire that particular auditor. And then I found out, or I saw, and again, I've kind of like started to look at this stuff more so in the last couple of days, because it became evident that there was really a problem. Then I see in or about, looks like May of 2025, yeah, May 15th, 2025, they're fined by the Texas Auditing Board for rule violation of 501.60, which apparently is suggesting that you have conducted an audit as to a financial statement following all the rules. And apparently they didn't. Apparently they suggested it, apparently, by this order, and they didn't. And they were fined $20,000 by the Texas board. And that's May 15th of 2025. So we're talking about, I think it's just a couple months after they were hired. So apparently a couple months before they're hired, they get dinged by the PCAOB, and the PCAOB, also regulated forgers, etc. And apparently a couple months after they're hired, then they get dinged by the Texas board. Probably something that should have been considered before they were hired. But again, not fatal, but with the history of the company's auditing, perhaps it should have been more closely followed. Now, what follows next is so we have that background, maybe important, maybe not, maybe irrelevant, really. Just because they had this stuff doesn't mean they couldn't have done a fine job, and I'll accept that fact. But again, because of the history, probably should have stayed away somebody that had this kind of near recent issues. So then I thought about, how much were these guys paid? I was wondering, because in that court hearing that occurred last week, the Receivers Council suggested that they were kind of coming back to the receiver to try to get more money out of the receiver. And that, to me, doesn't sound appropriate. Like for example, a lawyer can't say, during a trial, unless you pay me an extra 25 grand, I'm not going to finish the trial. So in this case, if there was some agreement, and I can't really talk about the documents, but my understanding is there was some engagement agreement. But if there's some agreement to have you stay on, then you can't kind of back out in the last minute and try to change the terms. And somebody would call that kind of conduct way beyond what I'm saying it. Depending on what business we're talking about, that can be called a lot of things, and none of it is really any good. So when I heard that they were asking for more money, it annoyed me. And I reached out to the attorney for the receiver, and I basically, said, you basically poo-pooed my concerns, but here we are. And then I found out and asked how much they had been paid. And my recollection was they were going to do they're going to do audits of at least 3 years. That was the original engagement. I think and I don't remember, I think it was 22, 23, and 24, and they're going to do an audit of all the stuff and all the transactions. And as time went on, even months ago, the complexity of this engagement grew and grew. At least that's what we were told, and that was in part the reason for all the delays. So I was told, and this is information relayed to me from the receiver's counsel based upon apparently his interaction with the receiver and based upon whatever the retainer that was paid by or to Barton. And I was informed that they haven't asked for any additional money. So whatever they were paid as a retainer was what they've gotten. And some, I was told by the receiver's counsel, was $27,500. Now, when I heard that, I thought, wow, that sounds kind of, that I thought that sounded light to me, especially considering that we should be near, based upon what has been disclosed in the reports. And I'm going to go into that, but not tonight. But what's been disclosed in all the receivers' reports and what's been disclosed in court, it sounds like the auditors should have been well down the road towards completion, because that's what we were told in court and in the reports. And $27,500 to me sounded like chump change. Didn't, for the thing that, as it was described, it did not sound right. So I then went on and did some research today, and I looked at Gemini AI, and then I found an article written by a auditing firm called Guzman Gray, which is based in California, and it kind of goes through what the ballpark range of costs of audits are. And remember, here we have 3 for 3 years. So in my mind, we're talking about 3 separate audits for 2022, 2023, and 2024. And Guzman Gray, which I'm looking at in front of me, Guzman Gray, Gray, they kind of talk about, different issues that cause or impact cost. And they talk about, what should an audit cost ballpark for various size entities. And they kind of break it apart, like, large entities, it costs as much as like $10 million, but average 5.6. Middle, and these are all public companies, by the way. So I took at the time GTI as a public company. That was my my kind of information I was provided. Then medium-sized companies, and medium-sized still might be very large. It said they could be around $2.4 million, whatever. And then I looked at, I'm not going to go to the small ones yet. And then I looked at kind of the factors that determine what would make an audit. Let me tell you. Let me do it this way. So small companies, it said the range would be anywhere from, let's say, $45,000 per audit to $250,000 for a small company, especially if they have to file the PCAOB rules, because even if they're small, they still have to follow the same rules. So same issues. So $45,000 to $250,000, and I kind of like multiplied that, and that's about $135,000. And I thought about that. So it's $135,000 versus $27,000 paid, and we're supposed to be at the end of the audit. That really that really caused me concerns, by the way. And that's just using the minimum amount, because according to this says that a minimum audit should have cost $45,000 per audit. And this, we're talking about 3 audits here. But the auditor had only paid $27,500 and had not requested any additional money, and supposedly was at the end. That just didn't sound right. Why would somebody leave money on the table? You know, it didn't make sense to me. So I continued reading on, and it then described what kind of factors do you look at to decide, because I gave you a big range there for one audit. Small companies, 45,000 to 250. What do they look at? What makes an audit more expensive? Well, one thing that makes an audit more, and this is kind of what it says in it, one thing that makes an audit more expensive is when there's no internal controls. In other words, when management, it can't be relied upon, and the auditor then has to do everything by hand. And that makes the thing more complex, and it makes it more costly, and it takes the audit cost up closer to the higher end. Another thing they said is when there's a lot of transactions that have to be reviewed. And if you recall, or maybe you don't recall, but the last time we went in court, not the last time, the one before, the receiver, I guess, argued or testified. No, I guess argued because he wasn't under oath, but argued about issues that related to the audit at that time, and issues related to like 1,000 transactions. So that were so egregious or had to be so carefully reviewed that he wanted the judge to look at it. So 2 of the main factors that would make an audit more expensive are present here. So when I heard the range 45,000 to 250,000, I thought, wow, this sounds like it should be closer to 250,000. And with 3 audits, that would be $750,000. That to me, that's what sounds like the audit cost should be. But maybe it's only one. Maybe even though it's 3 years, maybe I'm whatever. Let's cut it to a third. So I'm going to dump the other $500,000. So we get down to $250,000 for the audit. And we're told that they've been paid $27,500. And we've been told throughout that they're near the end. And I don't understand that. I don't understand how someone who purportedly is at the end of a $250,000 audit, who's only been paid $27,500, and is not requesting additional information, I don't get it. And I can't tell you the specific information, but let's say, just for the sake of discussion, the amount that the auditor was paid was a small percentage of the estimate of their total fees. And I'm just going to make up numbers, but let's say, for the sake of discussion, let's say the auditor estimated that the total audit was going to cost $10, and let's say they had been paid $1 and hadn't asked for additional money, and were apparently near the end of the audit. I would be concerned. I mean, that scenario does not make any sense to me. The gap between what someone has been paid and what they should be paid at the end of a job. So to me, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about the auditor and what they were paid, and what the agreements were, and what they were asked, and what they represented, and what the receiver knew, and what happened to the first partner, and why did they need to restart the audit, and why did they come back on the last day of the court and basically withdraw without having complete the job. I can go on go on. But those questions need to be answered. And the fact that there's such a discrepancy between what they were paid and what they estimate really causes me concern. And again, I don't know who the concern should be directed at, but seems like the auditor has a lot of explaining to do, and that might lead us elsewhere. I don't know. So I wanted just to bring that up because I've been thinking about it. I've had interchange with the Receivers Council, and the discrepancy in the numbers causes me concern. I think it causes all concern. It should cause the receiver concern. It should cause the auditor concern, especially based upon the auditor's recent sanctions by the PACOB and the Texas, whatever their equivalent department, one for $25,000, one for $28,000, basically one for reporting, one for apparently kind of, I'm not going to say it's a misrepresentation, but suggesting something that's not true. And, was somebody asleep at the wheel? Should somebody have known all this stuff? Should somebody have been, it kind of, makes me think of, if something sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. So if you would have hired this firm because they charged 1/3 of what other firms did, and then that same firm that charges 1/3 that other firms did, then charged you 1/10 of what they said they were going to charge, that sounds like it's too good to be true, and you should be running for the hills. And I don't know why. I don't know why it was let to get to this point as of today where the auditor quit, because that doesn't do anybody good. And I don't understand, based upon the fact the auditor quitting, how their work product can be relied upon. And, just shot, again, the handling of the audit has been shabby and ineffective, and just just hasn't been handled the way it should have been handled. Somebody was not diligent enough in kind of watching the ball. The numbers didn't make any sense. They don't make any sense. And the representations apparently the receiver got from the auditor doesn't make any sense. And we really need answers. And I hope, again, and part of the reason I'm doing this is to give the Receivers Council an opportunity to address all these issues in writing and explain what went on, because we're entitled to an explanation. And we've been talking about an audit since the stupid start of this. So it's not like this is a new issue, and I have no idea. None of this makes any sense to me in light of the current facts, and I want to know. So, of course, I will keep everybody apprised, but I just wanted you to throw this out late on a Saturday night. Hoffman's thinking, not legal advice, is thinking about the numbers. And the numbers, to me, at least the numbers that they've been provided to me, maybe the numbers will turn out differently. Maybe they were paid a substantial amount more. Maybe they made multiple requests for more. I mean, a long time ago. Maybe they completed a lot of the work. But whatever. Again, another thing that doesn't pass the smell test, in my opinion, and that's why I was bitching about it for so long, because it just doesn't sound right, like a lot of stuff that's occurred in this particular matter. Anyway, have a great Saturday night. I hope you enjoyed those wonderful jokes. Please like, subscribe, share, and we'll be talking soon. And I'm sure I will have more to talk about very soon. So have a good night. Take care. Talk to you later.